Hello and welcome to Northwest Guitars. In this video we're going to be showing you how to apply one of our headstock decals to one of our necks. We get a lot of requests from customers asking if we can do this for them, but we just don't have the time to do it, so we thought it would be a good idea to make a video showing people a step-by-step process of how we actually do them. It's not rocket science, it's relatively simple to do. It just takes a little bit of time and a bit of patience. Now, we use nitrocellulose clear lacquer when we apply the decals to our necks, but our necks are actually polyurethane at the moment. Applying nitrocellulose over the top of polyurethane is not a problem at all. It doesn't cause any adverse reactions, but it is always worth testing it, maybe on the bottom of the neck, so that it's not noticeable, just in case you do get a reaction. But it's not something that's ever happened to us. So we're going to take you through the step-by-step process of applying a decal to the headstock. Okay, so here is the neck we're going to be using. The first thing we want to do is remove the nuts. Sometimes they're not stuck in, not our necks anyway, so you can usually flick them out with your thumbnail. Sometimes you might need a pair of pliers to just grip them. This one isn't in too tightly, so we can pull that out. Obviously just put that to one side, we don't want to lose that. And then we want to basically mask the rest of the neck off. So I've just got a piece of paper here, I'm just going to wrap the neck. And then I'm just going to make sure that I mask off to the end of the nut slot. A bit more. That way when I spray it, I'm going to be covering the whole of the headstock. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut out the decal. We've got, this is a 1954 Stratocaster decal. So we've got the actual decal itself, and then we've got the contour body decal that goes on the top of the headstock. You want to use a sharp pair of scissors with this and really sort of cut out a nice organic shape without any sharp edges, while trying to get as close to the bottom as you can, as that goes right near the bottom of the headstock. I haven't got a sharp pair of scissors, so I'm using my Swiss Army ones, and you basically just cut around this. Okay, so then we have two nice organic shapes. The next thing we want to do is put those in some warm water, which I've got here, and you'll find that they start to curl up when you put them in. So once I've put them in, I'll just straighten them up slightly, and I'll leave them in there for 4 to 5 minutes. They have a small amount of adhesive on the back, which can dry a little opaque if you take them out too soon, so a good 4 or 5 minutes soak. That'll get rid of the adhesive off the back of them, and then when they do dry on the headstock, when they do dry on the headstock, then they'll dry nice and clear. So that is just some warm water, that's it. Okay, so the decals have been in there for a good 4 to 5 minutes. We're now going to apply these to the headstock. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to dip my fingers in the water and just dampen the headstock in the place where I'm going to be applying the decals. Just makes the decal slide a little bit easier. Okay, so I'm going to grab the decal out. I'm going to place this. They are very delicate, so you've got to be really careful. Just place that on in roughly the correct spot, and then just slide it off. And as you can see, that's not bad. It's always worth just checking with your thumb, just to make sure that none of the decal is hanging over the edge of the headstock, as you can see there. So I'm just pushing it back a little bit, just making sure that the whole decal is in the right place. That's on there. Okay, then it's time for the contour body decal. I can get that out. Okay, it's already starting to come off. But again, the water on the headstock just makes it easier to slide them around, get them in what you think is the right spot. Something like that looks pretty good to me. Okay, I think that'll do. So now I'm going to take a paper towel. I'm just going to lie it on top of the headstock and just let it soak up some of the water. Not pressing too heavily, just very lightly. Just letting the towel do the work really, and just absorbing the moisture on top of the headstock. The decal might move slightly, but that's not too much of a problem. You can always move it around with your fingers. And then again, just pressing a bit firmer this time. Just to get rid of any more moisture. You can still move them around if you need to. They will start to stick now. That's looking pretty good to me. See, they're becoming more and more difficult to move. If I carry on moving them, I'm going to end up ripping the decals. They are very delicate. But I'm pretty happy with the placement there. So I think that'll do. What you might want to do as well is just check it in the light, just to see. Might not be able to show you here, but you can see if there are any air bubbles underneath the decal. As you can see there, you can see a few air bubbles underneath there. You can get it in the light again. You can just make them out there. So you just want to use the paper towel really, just to sort of smooth them out. It's nice and easy. You see the decal still moving a little bit. Just very lightly start to smooth out any air bubbles that you can see. And the more you do this, the better the decal will stick to the headstock. See how that's looking now. There you go, it's looking a lot better now. So that's pretty much it. Once you make sure you've got the decal in the right place, make sure it's nice and dry. Just check for any air bubbles. And that's it. What we're going to do now, we're going to leave that overnight, let that dry fully, and then we'll come back to it in the morning and we'll start to cover it with a few coats of nitrocellulose clear lacquer. Okay, so I've left the decal overnight to dry. That's nice and dry on there now. I don't know if you can see, but that's all ready to go. So we're just going to apply a few coats of nitrocellulose gloss over the top. Even though the finish is polyurethane on this neck, spraying nitrocellulose over the top of this isn't a problem, although it might be worth just checking suitability on the back of the neck just to make sure, but we've never had any problems with it and we've been doing this for years. Obviously nitrocellulose is pretty dangerous stuff. It's a cellulose based lacquer, so wear a mask if you can. Definitely work somewhere with some ventilation, open a few windows, or maybe do it outside. It only takes a couple of minutes to spray, and then just bring it back inside to dry. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply 3 or 4 thin coats over the space of a few hours. It only takes maybe 40 minutes for each coat to dry. So I'll come back, I'll do that maybe 3 or 4 times just to get a nice few coats on there. Then I'll leave that overnight again, come back tomorrow and we'll start to sand it down. So spraying is very, very easy, although with an aerosol it's always worth just making sure that the aerosol's working properly. And just to avoid getting a huge burst of lacquer, I like to start spraying from down here before the actual headstock. Nice even passes like that. Don't spend too much time on it. You can see that's starting to go slightly opaque now. I don't know if you can see that. And that's it, that's 1 coat done. So I'm going to leave that now for an hour, come back and then I'll do the same again. I'll do that, as I say, maybe 3 times. Then I'll come back, maybe do a double pass on the last time, and then leave it overnight ready for sanding. Now it will dry slightly matte. It won't be nice and shiny once it's dried. Nitrocellulose doesn't work that way, and it might feel quite rough to the touch, but that's normal, and obviously we're going to sand that down and polish it up a bit later on. Okay, so I've left the neck overnight so that the decal can fully dry. That's now all fixed on there nicely. You can probably see and get the light right. You can see that it looks slightly opaque, and you can see the outline of the decal. This has had about 3 coats of lacquer, and then a double pass, like a 4th coat of lacquer over the top of that. And yeah, you can now see a slight difference in colour where the decal is. What we're going to do now is concentrate on using a bit of wet and dry sandpaper to just remove some of that top layer. You can feel that there's a slight bump there. You can feel where it's slightly raised, so we're just going to work on trying to remove some of that. We're not going to go too crazy because we don't want to go through the decal, so we're just going to rub a little bit of that off, and then we're going to repeat the whole process, respray it, then sand it down again. We'll probably do that whole process 3 times. So what I've got here is just some warm water with a little bit of washing up liquid in there, and that just stops the wet and dry getting too clogged up. This is some 1200 wet and dry, some 1200 grit. I'm just going to use a small piece of that. You don't need too much. I'll follow that over there, and I've also got some paper towels just so I can wipe it off. So it's time to just start to slowly sand some of that top layer off. Again, I'm not using a lot of pressure, and I'm concentrating mainly on top of where the decal is. The idea is that you want to reduce the bump on top of the decal, and you're going to build up the lacquer around the decal so that they eventually meet in the middle, and then when you polish that up later on, you won't even be able to see that the decal's been applied. So again, keeping it nice and wet, not pushing down really at all, just letting the wet and dry do the work. And using my fingers, I can feel the bump there. I'm just trying to reduce that bump ever so slightly. So I can see that it's starting to smooth out a little bit now. Again, it's still going to look slightly opaque, although it's not as bad as it was before, and that will disappear the more work you put into it. There you can see that. What you should be left with is the outline of the decal. So you'll never get rid of that in the first pass. You don't really want to, because if you go too far you'll end up sanding through the whole of the decal. So you're just trying to remove the bump really around the edges, and don't worry about leaving that outline. So again, I'm just holding it up to the light so I can see the parts that I need to work on. And that's going to do it, I think, for me for now. As you can see, it doesn't look perfect, and there's still a long way to go, but I can feel that the bump is starting to disappear. It's still there slightly, but the last thing I want to do is go too far and sand through that whole decal. So there's still a raised edge there, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just dry that off properly, make sure there's no soapy residue left on there, and then I'm going to spray the whole headstock again. Again, another 3 passes, and then leave it overnight again, then come back and repeat the whole process again. So we'll come back tomorrow and we'll see how it looks once it's had another few coats of lacquer on it. Okay, so here we are again. Another three coats of lacquer over the top. You can see that's dried now, slightly opaque again, if you can see that. The bump is starting to disappear now. I can still feel it in certain places, but it's starting to disappear. So I'm just going to repeat the process that we did yesterday and sand this down a little bit more. Again, I've got my warm soapy water there. I'm just going to work on removing those top layers. Obviously it's going to be harder to rub through the decal now because we've got quite a few coats on, but you still need to be very careful, constantly checking it so you can feel where the bumps are. And also just be careful not to sand too close to the edge. You don't want to start to take the lacquer off the neck from the very edge of the neck. And we can see now that that's starting to look a bit better. I can get it in the light. Still see the outline there, but that's disappearing. So I'm going to work a bit more on that now. By angling it so I can see the light reflecting off it, I can tell whereabouts I need to concentrate my efforts. And it tends to be around this area here where it's really close to the edge of the headstock. That tends to be the tricky part. Just sanding a bit of lacquer off the rest of the headstock just to smooth it all out. I don't know if you can see this now, but even in the light it's becoming more and more difficult to see that opaque shape you just left, pretty much with just an outline of where the decal was, which I'm still working on, but you can see that where the decal is, it's completely clear now, so you can't see that opaque shape that you could see before. So now I'm just working on the edges, just trying to remove some of the edge of the decal so that that's less noticeable. Yeah, I'm not going too far because I'm going to do this whole process again as well. That to me is looking pretty good. Can't see any opaque shapes underneath the decal now, so it's starting to look pretty good. Any scratches and stuff will come out when we put a few more coats of nitro over the top, and then we're obviously going to polish those up a little bit later. You can see it's not 100% perfect. You can still see the little outline around the contour decal there, but that's not a problem. We'll concentrate on getting that off with the next pass, but I don't want to go too far and end up sanding through the decal, having to start the whole process again. So I think that'll do for now. I'm now going to put another 3 or 4 coats of lacquer over the top, leave it overnight again, then come back and we're going to start to finish it off tomorrow.